Football is my vessel. Football is my bloodline. So taking that and learning how to invest, from stocks and bonds, everything, it just comes from football. So, I'm always thankful that I just, in the people that I meet that are some of the best people, or people who I play football with.
We're back with one more down. Today we have Larry Jackson, running back, Penn Hills High School out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Larry was a teammate of mine at Edinboro University. He was a leader, outstanding running back, dynamic individual. And today we're going to talk about his life's journey through the lens of football, and more importantly, how the game has impacted his life and shaped him into the man that he is today. These are some of my favorite segments to do with people that I have a personal experience with and a deep insight into their talent athletically, but just the individual that they are outside of the confines of athletic pursuits. I appreciate having you on today, brother. It's been 33 years since we were out there trying to chase that championship in the PSAC West. To see the man that you've developed into and the dynamic things that you're doing in your life today, it just brings me a lot of joy. So I appreciate having you on and getting the chance to profile you as a guest today.
Likewise, Ron. I mean, I just think that when you blood, sweat, and tears, you go through trials and tribulations when you're in that football field. Your brotherhood is quite different. Like your responsibilities for that one person that shared, your most vulnerable time in your life is just that's always going to be someone that like you're gonna really be there for that person, knowing the sacrifices that person had for you. So likewise, I'm glad to be here after 33 years and share my story.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Larry. We had, however we edit this and how it comes out, had the opportunity to listen to a number of people speak on your behalf, and just really impressive. The athletic story, and then even the years after, right? So looking forward to kind of digging in and getting to hear more of your story.
We have the great Curtis Martin joining us today to give his reflections on his brother, Larry Jackson. Curtis was, as everybody knows, a top tier running back throughout his career, someone that inspired many youth throughout his time in the college ranks, the NFL ranks, but the endeavors and the platforms that he's attached himself to outside of the sport of football burns brighter than anything that he even did on the field. So it's a pleasure to have you here today, supporting our common brother, Larry Jackson. I want to thank you in advance for joining in with this segment and then adding light to what we're trying to do here for our brother.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Ron, in Dallas. Looking forward to it. One of my favorite people, so it's easy to talk about him.
We understand that you and Larry's relationship goes back to your youth when you guys were preteens. Can you give us some insight into what is the bond and the brotherhood between two men pursuing dreams to be something greater than their environment may have suggested, and how that has developed and blossomed over the years?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, man, is that Larry and our real relationship started after we got into a fight, and I ended up breaking my ankle in this fight. And I always tell Larry, he's lucky he was so much bigger than me. But that's how our relationship started off. And thereafter, it took us a while to recover from that. But then we just started becoming closer and closer once we got past that fight when I was 12. Larry's a couple years older than me. So I think he was 14. And since he was 14 and I was 12, that's when our relationship started. And, now we're in our 50s and we're still best friends.
As it's been well documented, athletics wasn't your pursuit initially. Can you give some thought into, what you thought of Larry, watching him chase his dream as a running back over there at Penn Hills High School?
Yeah, well, something, man, Larry was like a star. Larry was like famous in Penn Hills. And so I used to look at him and the size. I mean, when we were like 14, Larry was like the size I was when I was playing in the pros. And I mean, built, I mean, rocked up. And so there was a part of me that always thought that I could never be good like that because I never saw myself being that size. And Larry will tell you, I used to hate to lift weights. I used to hate to work out, all of that stuff. So football just wasn't in the picture for me. I played during, little league, but that was it. I hadn't played throughout my high school or junior high career. But Larry was someone that I always admired because the running back that he was and the things I would see him do on the field, I would just admire from afar, but never really thought that I could do that. And so there was a part of Larry that really challenged me once I did start playing football because we were so competitive with one another being best friends that it was like, oh, man, I in my mind, I could never live up to Larry, because he was like the greatest in my mind at that time. And I ended up playing football. I always knew that I had talent, but I didn't know that it would go as far as it went. But Larry, in the beginning, I always saw Larry as the bar. He was like the standard.
And as you find your way as an outlet as a senior, and you get back into the game, and things are starting to develop for yourself. Did Larry give you any help, advice, or insight about what you could potentially do carrying that forward?
The best advice, and I won't even call it advice, but the best motivation that Larry gave me was that he was killing it in college. And so for me, I'm in high school. I'm trying to kind of live up to that, or I'm trying to surpass that. And so that was what, we always pushed each other. We always pushed each other. And with him being ahead of me and in my mind, so much better than me, it just drove me to want to be, when I was out there on the field, I wanted to have something that was impressive because a lot of times Larry would come with his high school tapes or his college tapes. And, you watch Larry running, I'm just like, wow, like, man, how do you do that? And once I started playing football and started having some success, he would always say, man, Kurt, like, I think you could be real. I think you could earn a scholarship, man. Maybe you can come up to Edinboro with me. So we had those types of conversations. And, but I was always inspired by who he was during that time throughout high school and college.
So, I always find it interesting that, sometimes in life we have, a certain perception of ourselves, and then it takes somebody else to see something in you that draws it out. So I'll kind of kick this to Larry. What did you see in Curtis leading up to that time that caused you to say some of those things to him to help him along the way or incentivize him, not just with your actions, but even some of those conversations, to seeing him to help him along the way to get back into football and play and so on.
So just give you a back end story. So when I first began our friendship, Curtis was playing midget football, and Curtis's structure of how he ran was totally different from when he got into high school. But Curtis only played 1 year. So 5 years just away from football, me and Curtis dynamics we were just friends. Like football, we didn't have any, we was athletics, like we were more like Adam, but we were competitive outside of football. We never competed with one another, but we competed with each other, like some simple things like we would play Tecmo Bowl, right? We was very competitive, but I was very tactical. Like I was just, 2 + 2, 4. Curtis is very strategical. So every time I'm playing checkers. This guy's over here playing chess. And that's his whole dynamics. That's how he is who he is today. He's very strategical. I'm tactical. Like I can see things, I can consume it, and I can achieve it. Curtis, sometimes he's delusional. Like he'll say things and we're like, man, get out of here. Like, and then along the way, when Curtis was going into his senior year, I just remember him coming over and he's showing me like scrimmages. And I'm like, ooh, Kurt, like you looking sharp. And then like his body structure was totally different from Menjic Lee. Like his shoulders was a little broader, but he never worked out. He was just natural. He was just a God gifted talent. And then I started seeing his transition in high school. He probably had one of the most dominant senior years as a running back ever in Western Pennsylvania. And I just knew that this was something different. Like I knew Curtis was different. So it was almost like a scene from Unnecessary Roughness. So the guy caught the ball and he's running hard. Like I was always like in front of Curtis, but as I'm running hard and all I see is like Curtis catching up to me. And I'm like, what? So then I just seen Curtis just go past me. And it was hard to deal with because I was the person who was like always into working out. I was always into all these dynamics of trying to get to the next level. And Kurt was just me. He was like, I don't really like football's okay. And I'm sitting there like, I love it though. And he's like, man, I don't love it like that though. I'm like, man, you don't? So I'm just thinking because of my love for it, I should be farther than Curtis. Because I started out farther than Curtis. I love it. And things that Curtis wasn't just in love with, it was just a natural. So, but when Curtis has started transitioning to really taking it serious, it's his senior year after football, not during, but after football is when his head coach was saying, hey, I don't think you're ready for the NFL. And from that point on, Curtis just went totally opposite and took it really serious. And 11 years later, Hall of Fame.
To that point, what Larry is talking about is my senior year. I had the biggest game of my life against Texas in the first game of the season. I had like 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns. And the second game, I got hurt and I missed the rest of the year. Now, I was a senior in college, so I wasn't sure. I just didn't really like football that much, and I definitely didn't like school. And I said, you know what? The only person I could probably get some good advice from is my head coach, at the time, who was Johnny Majors. And I went to meet with them, and I just told him, what I was thinking about. I was like, do you think I should just take my chances and try to make it into the pros, or should I stay in college? And he just, and in his defense, he was just trying to, I believe, scare me into staying, in college. And so what are you even thinking about the pros? You can't even stay healthy in college. You won't even be able to survive in the NFL. That is the dumbest thing that I've ever heard anyone say. And again, to his credit, I know that he was just trying to guide me the right way, but the way he was doing it, like, I think he didn't realize that I was still, Curtis from Homewood, and which Homewood's like the hood in Pittsburgh. And so he's talking to me. And for me, I just felt so disrespected. At the end of the conversation, I remember looking at him and I said, sir, I got respect for my elders, so I would never disrespect you the way I really want to disrespect you right now. I said, but you know what? Thank you, because you gave me my answer. I won't be playing for you next year. I don't know what I'll be doing. I'll either go home or maybe I'll make it in the pros. I don't care, but I won't be here next year. And I got up and walked out of his office. I walked out of his office with a chip on my shoulder. You know what I mean? Now, and Larry knows how I am, like when I'm challenged like that. So it was from that moment that Larry's talking about where I literally started taking football serious for the first time in my life. Yep. Started working out like I've never worked at anything in my life before. And you know, slowly but surely, I made some progress. I got a couple of looks. There were some people who were interested in me from my junior year. I ended up getting on to the blue and gray game, and then I got to the Senior Bowl somewhat miraculously, and I ended up getting a shot in the NFL and made the most of it.
And so what's that dynamic like, you know, with you two as you know, as Curtis, you transition, and obviously you guys have remained friends and very close, and moved on to the second half of life in terms of, you know, not athletics. And so how has that friendship developed? You know, Larry, as you're watching Curtis, as you're still friends with Larry, how is that dynamic?
Yeah, I told Ron this. Curtis was just patient, right? I just think that when things didn't go my way after college is when I was really selfish. I was selfish. I was telling Ron as I was playing football, but I really got selfish once football was over with Curtis because I felt like, damn, you know, you got into safe haven that I was trying to get to. But Curtis being Curtis, he would just let me just, you know, not just so let me, he would just allow me to make mistakes. But then I remember when I started understanding like how like I needed to kind of like bounce back. And once I bounced back, I guess Curtis waited till I got to the point that I had enough strength for him to say, man, but you know, being your friend was hard. And I was like, what? He's like, you are just an asshole. He's like, man, it was just hard being your friend at that time when you were just going through your bullshit. And I was just saying to myself, like, and he was like picking off of some things that I was doing, and I started looking at it like, wow, like you a hell of a friend. Like for you to fundamentally be there for my growing pains. And this is like we're adults, so it's like we didn't get emotional or anything, but it was just, you know, you could tell my voice cracking when I'm talking. I'm like, because I was like, it was like that moment I realized that, damn, you know, for all that you was there for me. So that was the most important thing to this day that like I can come to Curtis about anything and he always has my best interest. And for some odd reason, he's just like heaven sent. Like he's just one of the greatest humans that you can actually because he's not going to tell you what you want to hear. Still to this day, I can give him fluff. I could say something just dramatic, like, "Hey man, these stocks and bonds, man, this is it right here." And he's just like, "Nah, man." He's like, "You gotta take your time. You gotta do the research." So, you know, he's always like it's like the roles that switch. I went from big brother to little brother. so he's now the big brother, man. It's not the dynamics of him being more successful. It's just that he's always been a leader. Like he's, you know, some people just got it. You know, you talk to anybody around Curtis's circle, he just got it. Like he just, a leader of just his dominance. He just his presence. Like you'll sit down with him, and after like 5 minutes, you're like, yeah, he's a leader. You know, he's a leader.
You know, what is it like for you guys to be in your 50s now, to look back over that time and to see how life is treating each one of you in terms of successes, developing into fathers, and you know, entering new territory as brothers that you have to conquer?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, what I've seen between Larry and I are two men who have grown together. We've been through a lot of stuff together. And I've always been one who thinks that good relationships are made through the fire. You know, it's when you go through, it's almost like marriage. You know, you're not really committed until you go through that time in your marriage when you feel like, I hate this person lying in the bed next to me. I just want to choke this person or whatever, you know, and I'm sure my wife felt like that. But when you can go through hell with someone and come out on the other end better for it, and when you make that a habit, I think that every time you go from point A to point B, the relationship gets stronger. I've always been someone who I'm relationship first. You know, I don't allow money, I don't allow fame, I don't allow any of that to come between me and my friends or me and my relationships. Now, I say that, but everyone around me, like Larry will tell you, I'm brutally honest. Now, I'm honest, but I'm honest with love. I don't just, well, this is just the truth, so I'm gonna say the truth. No, Larry will tell you, I try to be as, you know, kind as I can when I'm saying something that I know someone doesn't want to hear. But I believe that that's what a good friend does. I'll never forget. And, you know, Larry referred to when I told him, like, man, being your friend was hard as hell. You know, I'll tell you this. We go to this one game, and, you know, back then, me and Larry were like the cool guys, right? You know, and we got on our fresh sweatsuits and new sneaks and everything. And back then, you know, to have a video camera was like a big thing. So I'm you know, filming the game and everything. All the girls are around. Larry ain't tell me I had a big booger in my nose. You know what I mean? I had the biggest booger in the world in my nose. And Larry let me go the whole time without knowing. And finally, this one girl that I, you know, was really cool with, I kind of liked her. She's like, Curtis, I just got to tell you, you got the biggest booger in your nose. And I looked at Larry like, you mean to tell me you let me? So that was one of his a-hole moments, you know? But again, back to the point of when you can go through all types of stuff, and like that's nothing compared to some of the things that Larry and I have been through and some of the experiences that we've had to go through. But to come out on the other end and be better for it, like to me, that's true friendship. And that's the reason why we're in our 50s and we're even closer than we were at any other stage of our lives. I would say that today, as we're talking right now, this is the closest Larry and I have ever been.
You know, as we traditionally start off our segments, we like to get a feel of who the man is and, you know, those early foundational beginnings. You come from Western Pennsylvania, you know, outside of the city of Pittsburgh. Can you start off with introducing us to your family dynamics in terms of your siblings, your mother and your father?
Well, I'm Larry Jackson. Mother Evelyn Tucker, father Norman Tucker, siblings Naja Jackson, Tara Jackson. Just in a small family group session, um, out of out of Braddock, Pennsylvania, and then we moved over to Penn Hills when I was around 9 years old. So from 9 to my adulthood, I resided in Pittsburgh, Penn Hills, Pennsylvania.
You know, Braddock is former territory for the schools that merged together to become Woodland Hills. So are you telling me that you could have potentially been a Woodland Hills Wolverine?
Could have potentially been a Woodland Hills Wolverine. It's funny because I knew a lot of players that during my time in football that I knew really well. So like friendship outside of football, just that that one time, that one game a season, we wasn't friends. But outside of that, just had a lot of friends that played for Woodland Hills.
And you know, what is the influence of your mother and your father on your early development? You know, coming up in Pittsburgh through some of those early transitions.
My father was a steel mill worker. He dedicated his career in steel mills. very so much to a point that he was super intelligent. He started investing in real estate. So at one time, my dad had 6 properties, and always kept a Cadillac. That was at the time that afros and Cadillacs, right? So my dad didn't have afro because he was like me, he was bald, but he kept the Cadillac. So he at least kept one thing. My mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. Then when my mom and dad separated, went through the divorce, my mom was a hustler, man. My mom, she worked in a it's called jitneying. So it's like taxis, but without paying for taxes. So it's like behind the scenes pay. And so my mom was a jitney driver for 25, 30 years.
When you think about the grittiness of a place like Pittsburgh, your dad on one end of the spectrum inside the mills, your mother making a way for you guys to continue to survive and thrive. What part of that shapes you?
Great question. So Pittsburgh's a blue collar city. Like it's only one way to go in, is one way to go out. And coming up in the 70s, it was City of Champions. Like we had Pittsburgh Steelers doing quite well, winning Super Bowls. Even the Pirates, Pittsburgh Pirates, can you believe it? They won a national championship in the 70s. So and there was a lot of money coming. It's like Ohio. It was a lot of money coming through the city because of steel mills. And then once the steel mills started closing down, it impacted the city. And one of the cities was where I was actually residing at in Braddock. It was one of those cities like Braddock, McKeesport, The Hill, Northside. Those cities were predominantly successful Black men. And then when the steel mills closed down, it just taught me how to be tough. Like Pittsburgh was I love everything about Pittsburgh because it taught you how to be tough. And what I mean is, you just had a strong mentality, or you were just going to get broken. And so one thing that I love really wholeheartedly about Pittsburgh is that even though your family, your friends would be tough, but they wouldn't let you go and jump a bridge. Like they make sure they would support you, but they would do it in a way or in a means that it would toughen you up. So blue collar city, like your Ohio's, your Pennsylvania's, um, your Michigan, like your Detroit's, just hard nosed cities, man. So Pittsburgh had that type of pedigree.
And so when did your passion for sports or your love of sports that pursuit come into play?
That was part of my DNA, man. I mean, I just remember as a kid, it was just watching TV and just living, breathing Pittsburgh Steelers. Like if Pittsburgh is one of the cities you go through, you know when you land, you're in Pittsburgh because you're going to see somebody with Steeler apparel. Like it's nothing like it. You can go to Dallas, you can go to San Francisco. I'm in Atlanta. You don't see no apparel, but Pittsburgh, you land, you're in Pittsburgh because it's just like, fans stand by their teams, other than the Pirates, but the Steelers is just like one of those. It's just a ray of when you are watching or you're coming through your upbringing in Pittsburgh. It's just part of your DNA.
And so what was you know, we often talk to a lot of people from the Youngstown area, Ohio area, and Ron's obviously expanded out to different areas with his college experience. Um, we talk about the landscape of youth football in the Youngstown area. What did that look like in Pittsburgh and the surrounding boroughs, if I will, um, in in your time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So football, in the cadence of football, you always wanted to try to see if you can stay in an organization that can land you through your high school. And that was a very important, and I didn't really know the purpose of it, but fundamentally, if you stay in that program and you develop and you go into high school and you went through the organization of Penn Hills, it gives you a better opportunity to advance and being on the playing field. And so you had a metro midget league programs. Then you also had city league. The interesting thing is, it's like we would play each other in the suburb metro midget league programs, but then we always would say, we want to play schools in the city league. Was able to play Braddock. We was able to play Northside. So Northside, like these teams are the city league teams. But then once we got to high school, city leagues didn't play with metro teams. But we had a great respect for one another because we panned the way of playing in midget league football together. So by the time that we get into high school, city leagues playing against city leagues, metro is playing against metro, but we all had a respect for one another.
You get some of that early intersectional play. That gives you a peek into some of the guys that you're going to be competing with at the upper levels. Um, those first entries into youth football for you. What is that experience like for you in terms of getting acclimated and you know uh, putting into position who you are thinking that you're going to become in the future?
So I didn't have any admiration of becoming um someone. Um I was trying to figure it, like when I first my first 2 years, I was just trying to figure it out. Like, what's my position? I started out, I wanted to be Lynn Swan. So I went out for a wide receiver. And then I just remember that same year, because I was skinny. So I was like, but I was taller than a lot of my peers. So they were like, hey, do you want to try being a quarterback? So they see me throw it. It was like, oh, this ain't gonna work. So like it took me 2 years to understand, like, what is my purpose here on the football field. So then going into my second year is when I was moved into a running back position. And so I didn't really start having a personal attachment to players until I got into high school. So then I started going through my identity crisis. So the one person I really loved was, Eric Dickerson. Like that was like I was fascinated of his running style. And but I really admired people like Walter Payton. But Walter Payton, his flash in the way that he was able to leap over things, and like that wasn't me. And I learned that, trying to, because as you're going through stages, you try to do things that you realize that that's not you. So I remember the first time I tried to do the little hurdle, and when I did the hurdle, I landed on the ball and knocked the wind out of me. I said, "No, the Walter Payton thing ain't for me, man." So, so it's just developing, in practice is allowing you to develop. So as I started going through um, identifying who I actually am, it probably took me until I got into high school, because even in middle midget league, it was just coaches just putting you in position that they felt that you best serve a purpose. And I don't know, like at that time, that I was sold on being a running back until I got into high school.
That Penn Hills program was known for their take on two-a-days and camp at the high school level. Can you shed some light on, what that experience was for those players coming through that system, and the uniqueness of what they allowed you guys to do for that camp experience in that time?
So we started out with our camp was we're living in the gym. So we did that for a week. So that's our football season. Our football season started out with living in the gymnasium for a week and no air conditioning, just bring your fans and make it do what it do. And subsequently, I went through that in 3 seasons, my 10th grade, 11th grade, and my 12th grade year. And so once we went through our camp, and the camps was really tough, in Pittsburgh, humidity, it's 90 degrees out there, and you have 3-a-day practices. And those 3 days practices, you're trying to show improve, you're trying to get a job. You're pretty much, fighting your peers and doing whatever you have to do to get a starting position. And in Pittsburgh, once again, at this time in the 80s, it was so much competition that off the field, we didn't look at it as competition. We were all friends. We didn't carry we didn't carry anything coming from practice onto going onto the bus or things in our personal space. We didn't carry none of that football stuff in our personal space. But if you looked at us practicing and you were able to come to a practice, you would probably think that we didn't like each other. Our head coach, Neil Gordon, he came from Florida State. And my first year, we went 0-10. And it just never settled right with Neil. So going into my junior year, he was very aggressive as far as after school programs, working out, lifting. He wanted everybody that was in a skilled position, wide receiver, running backs, to be on the track team. Like he was very dedicated into winning. But Penn Hills is a great program, great tradition for winning. And so going into our senior year, we went from 0-10. I think it was like we went to 4-6 to 7-3. So each year the program kept getting better and better. And then by the time I got into college, it was like 3 years later, they won the state championship. So just a very competitive, Penn Hills is a very competitive organization.
0-10, that is a ominous thing. And I think that, navigating some of today's players, when you have losing seasons, you lose kids, you lose interest. You're on the opposite end of that trajectory, right? You go 0-10, improve. And then, as you said, 2 years later, you're winning a state championship. What do you think kept everybody believing, hey, we can turn this around? And also, what do you think you were able to contribute, be an integral part of that turnaround?
It starts out with leadership. Our coach, he installed in a belief in ourselves, and he started phasing out the negativity. Even when there were like ideal top players, I wouldn't announce their names, like because they were like a nuisance around the team and they were like great players. He were letting them go. And that's when you start saying, wow, this guy, he's serious. Like he sees something in us because he eliminated some of our top players in trying to make a statement, which we started listening because I'm like, well, I'm not as good as these players that like he said don't come back to our practice field no more. And then you start looking at that and start saying, well, I'm not as good as them, so let me just follow suit. So you start understanding what his development was, what his leadership was, and you bought into the process. And then as you start going through practices, you start seeing like the gamuts of, you going through these conditioning programs and you start seeing the development. And then shortly, but you start believing in it. So once we start believing it, we started achieving it. But it didn't happen overnight. It was just a consistent progression that we just had to go through and dedicate ourselves. But it started out with leadership. I can't take any credit to that. It was basically Neil Gordon and his staff who set a benchmark for us to follow behind.
Yeah, and I think you know, and that's a very humble statement, and I definitely appreciate that, but there has to be a group of guys, kids, players that do buy in, and then it shows fruit.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's funny that you mentioned that because um, we had some phenomenal talent, but then we had ones that were so dedicated into like we had Corey Sanders. Like he was very vocal and he was a senior, I was a junior. And it started out with the players coming into the locker room talking to peers. So, it's almost like you'll listen to your head coach and your coaching staff, but then when you have the players who's bought into it and they start disciplining you, then it starts now transitioning into other players. But it starts out with, inside leadership too. It just can't be just at a high level. It has to come down to the ground. And when it came down to the ground with the players, it was like Corey Sanders. There was Adam Martin. And then you had players coming from winning from the ninth grade teams that was coming up to the senior teams. And all they knew was winning. So they're like, man, like they would get on like seniors about how we're going to get our position taken from them. So it was just a great dynamic. It was just one of those things that at the time you had people coming up that was great players. So it was putting pressure on the seniors, the juniors, and then you also had people that was actually seniors who believed in our coaches that were leaders as well. So you had vocal leaders, and then you just had some people who just was quiet, Dallas, to the point that they just let their play do the talking. They didn't say anything, but you just follow behind them because you seen that this person was motivated, this person was determined. Didn't have to say anything. You just would follow them. So you had vocal leaders, and then you had leaders that was just lead by action.
I'm familiar with some of the areas of Pittsburgh and, the groups that you guys play in, some of those outer line suburban leagues in the Quad A section. There's just high level competition. There's some big time players that go on to, be tremendous players at the Division I level. We talked to one of your guys earlier, Adam Martin, who was your backfield mate, who had outstanding talent. The two of you on the field together, it's like one-upmanship in terms of one long run after another long run. And then I see that you guys had Steve Russell at quarterback, who ended up being a rival of ours when he was at IUP. Who are some of the guys that, you were testing yourself against throughout that senior year of yours that, you really had to get up and bring your best game to perform and produce?
Great question. But for me, it was, once again, it was the players that was coming behind us. It was the juniors, the sophomores. Like, that's why we built a state champion team, because of what was coming behind us. Like, them guys that was coming behind us, they wasn't playing. Like, it wasn't the seniors that was pushing each other. It was actually the younger team members that were just great talent. And then at the time, because of we were coming into a transition that we wasn't great, they were like, man, we're taking your position. Like, we're coming after that. So our practices was like no other. Like, we would challenge ourselves on those Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And it was like playing a game. And so the development for me came from being pushed from the undergrads. Like, those players built me, and they fundamentally made me more sound, because they were after my position. Like, if I was coming off the field, they were coming on the field like, hey man, like I'm ready to score. Like, it wasn't no intimidation from them. Them guys was no one's intimidated. Like, they wanted everything that we had and more. And they proved it, because once we left and they fell in the void and, super exceeded our expectations.
We're speaking with Larry Jackson today, getting his thoughts as a football player and how his career went performing for Penn Hills High School during the late 80s. Today we have his backfield mate, Adam Martin, all-state running back out of Penn Hills, PA, former Akron Zip linebacker. It's a pleasure to have you on with us today and getting your take and your thoughts on your brother Larry Jackson here.
No doubt. glad to be a part of it.
The connection between yourself and Larry, you were a dynamic duo during the '89 season. Both of you sharing the load as running backs. I know you can't get enough carries, but you guys divvied up that load very well. Can you give your thoughts and your insight into what that time was for you and Larry as you guys were tearing it up on the gridirons in Western Pennsylvania?
Oh man, it was competitive. Like, Larry and I, like, the thing that I think separated me and him from most people is we loved each other, but I wanted to be better than him and he wanted to be better than me. If I got, we'd be in a huddle and I get a long play and he'll be like, oh man, they keep giving Blackie the ball, right? Like, so I would have to hop in the huddle and be like, hey, yo, man, you go ahead and run this play. I'll block for you because you can't block, right? So I'll make sure you do that. But it was competitive. I mean, from the weight room to the exercising. Like, if I done 25 dips, he wanted to do 26. He don't care what the next person did, long as he beat me. Same thing with him. If he ran a 10-1, I want to run a 10 flat because I wanted to beat him. Didn't care about it. But that competitive nature drove me in his relationship, and it drove us to be the best of what we did, because like, we never wanted to be an edge up on each other. So like, practice was dog days. Like, I try to dog him out, he tried to dog me out. But as soon as the whistle blew and we was walking in the grass, me and him was talking crap on everybody else. But that's just, I don't know if you can be competitive with people you don't care about, right? So me and him generally cared about each other, but at the end of the day, I was top dog in my mind. And at the end of the day, he was top dog of his mind. Okay, let's get on the field. That's what we did.
And Larry, can you give some reflection in terms of what you thought of your backfield mate as a added commodity to the success of your team?
Yeah, everything went through Adam. Like, so I didn't play until my senior year. Adam was really one of the top players in Pennsylvania. So not just in Western Pennsylvania, but in Pennsylvania. So Adam was very unique. He started his freshman year. And Ron, why that was so unique is Penn Hills High School didn't start until 10th grade. So 10th, 11th, 12th. So Adam, he had to go in a special transportation to pull him over to the high school. And he left out of middle school early just to make practice every day. So this was something unknown. Like at this time in the 80s, our coaches didn't play freshmen. Not along even had freshmen move from the freshman team to senior team. So that's how great Adam was. So he was the upper echelon. We followed his lead, but I would never tell him that. And also by us challenging each other, we made everyone around us better. We started out my sophomore year, we were 0-10. By the time that I graduated and it was Adam's junior year, we made the playoffs. So that was a big leap coming in 3 years of having 3 seasons going from 0-10 to making the playoffs. And then that caveat kept continuing within our legacy in the next 10, 20 years. So fundamentally, it was there. The program was phenomenal, as you'll hear from Chuck Sanders. It broke its mark for like 2-3 years, and me and Adam, we got it back together. So, but it was through his leadership.
I think what you said resonated with me in terms of the competition, right? And how you care. And I think a little bit of that is lost in today's society. With the thing that jumped out to me was iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. And how you have two really talented competitive players that are going at it every day in practice. And I think a really good point was that you wanted to elevate your game, not diminish your teammates' achievements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And how do you, we're all a little bit more mature, we're all a little bit more knowledgeable. How do you think that dynamic impacted both your careers moving forward?
Oh man, for me it was, you can be the best at what you do. That doesn't mean you have to diminish somebody else's, returns. Because like you learn, and I've learned in life, like everybody's not where you are in your journey. But in that football journey, shit, Larry might have been ahead of me sometimes is what I felt. But that competitive nature was like, I'm not never gonna tell him that. Like I would never tell him, hey, yo, you just dope. You all right. You know what I'm saying? You be good. And he do the same thing to me. Oh, that was a decent run, but you could have did this and cut back and did the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Just like that. But what it taught me, man, is you can care about people and you can be great at the same time, right? And you don't have to, I would say make people feel bad because you're good, right? And me and him, I don't even think me and him made each other feel bad. I think we kept each other grounded now that I look back on it. Like, yo, I wasn't going to go be too big in his eyes. He wasn't going to be too big in my eyes. But, yo, if there was a yard to get and it was the last play and who was going to get the ball last, I was. He wasn't. He fumbled. I wouldn't. That's what I would tell him. You going to fumble. I'm not. So.
What's the characterization of football in the late 80s in Pittsburgh? I know guys that we played with in college some were dynamic superstars within those different levels of WPIAL football. You have the Jody Dickersons, you have the Corey Keys down at Steel Valley, You have Marcel Weems, who ends up going on to Akron and being a quarterback there. Listening to Steve Russell, in the City League, you're talking about Major Harris, you're talking about the great Brashear teams. We played with Lateef Walters in college, who was a powerhouse at Westinghouse. What is that like to be in a large metro area and just be immersed in all these pockets of talent, and you want to do something to get yourself in the Gazette or the press on a Saturday morning? Take us through that experience in terms of how that is for Penn Hills to go out and display their product against those other teams around that metro area.
Yeah. So going back into the midget league, right? So there was no dominance because you had to have, there was a weight limit. So no one could be over 130 pounds. And if you was, then they would have a negotiation saying, hey, you got a player that's 100 over 130. We have a player under 130. You let your player play, we let our player play. And then but every negotiation, that player didn't win. I mean, that player didn't play every negotiation. It was just when other team had a player that didn't make weight. But we played against city leagues and we was getting thrashed. Like, I'm talking about city leagues, they had all the talent. Like when you see a Steve Russell, you see a Derek Russell, you see a Lateef Waters, like those guys was phenomenal. Like you see their athletics, like they were phenomenal. The only thing they didn't have was they didn't have the line. Like, you play against a city league team, you had somebody my size that's 195 pounds playing tackle. And then you gotta have that person 195 going against somebody who's 260. Like, even if the person that was 195 was, I mean, you're gonna just wear that person down eventually, right? So even if the city team did come out with a lead that was like 14-0, by a third quarter, you're gonna just wind them down. And then another thing is, city schools that they had like maybe 25 players that was on their team when we were coming with 120. Like, it's just, they had the talent, they had the skills, they just didn't have the line. And then when it comes down to like like um like putting in position for special teams, like we were dominant in special teams because the people that was our second team was just as good as our first team. And then special teams for city schools, they, what was it called? Iron Man. Like you had to play everything. Like that was city leagues that they had, like Perry. There was a powerhouse in the 80s, 90s. But you would take a player, his name was Ramon Hart or something. Man, I seen this guy play. Man, this guy was on kickoff team, kickoff receiving, punt team, punt return, offense, defense. I said, damn. I said, when did he come up for a breath of air? Like, so that's the thing about a city. Like, they were the skill players. So in Pittsburgh, if you would put us and they were able to say, okay, well, we want to take some of your offensive line or just your line on offensive defense, and we want to split it, city leagues would be dominant because they had players that we couldn't fundamentally keep up with. Because in midget league, you have Wilkinsburg, you had North Hills, you had Homewood. Those teams were dominant. And then once we got into high school, they wasn't as dominant because they didn't have the weight. Like when it came down to in the trenches in the line, they could not, like I said, they can get an early lead, but they couldn't sustain it because they're just gonna get wear down. And a lot of those players was playing iron ball. They was all over the field. So that's the difference at the time in the 80s, 90s. It's just that they didn't have they had the skilled players, they didn't have the linemen to win against a powerhouse team like a quad A or like Aliquippa, like they were coming up and they were wreaking hell. And then right now, 30 years later, they're still dominant. Like, and Vito Farr came from Aliquippa, and you know, his skill set, he was very talented. He just was undersized.
We have Charles Sanders joining us today, former Penn Hills Indian running back, Slippery Rock University, two-time All-American, and former NFL player with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the San Diego Chargers. It's a pleasure to have you on here today, coming to support our common brother, Larry Jackson, and getting your thoughts and some insight into the connection that lives between the two of you men. So it's a pleasure to have you join us for this segment today.
Oh, great to be here, Ron, Dallas, guys. My little youngin' Dallas. That's my little youngin' right there. You know, I don't recognize with that white beard. I don't know, making me feel old. He's looking good though.
To begin, you know, Larry is pointed to you as the guy that had major influence over himself and Adam Martin. You brought them along as a coach during their time at Penn Hills. Can you give us some thoughts and opinion of the type of man and player that Larry was as a scholastic athlete?
Yeah, I think it starts with, you know, we all learn in life, and especially as you get older, you know, how important timing is and God having you in a certain place at a certain time for a certain reason. And then when you get a little older, you look back and you go, wow, that really was the right time, the right place to be there. And a lot of times other people will know what's going on in your life because, you know, as men, we don't really, you know, go out there and show it and say it. But I had just basically got out of the NFL, not because I chose. And when you know the NFL, they send you home, you know. So I was back home and I was a little bit down. You're young, you know, you didn't have 2-3 years in the league. You think you're going to be, you know, the next Jim Brown or whatever position you play. And then the reality hits that, you know, hey, it ain't going how I thought it was going to go. And your first thing is to blame everybody else. But then you just realize, hey, so I had came back home and I was with the Steelers, but it was, I had been done with the career. So I started hanging around the high school, my old high school. Me and Larry both went to Penn Hills. And it just so happened that was the year that they were coming in. I think he was a junior then. Yeah, I think he was maybe a junior, even a sophomore. But that team was coming in, him and Adam and a bunch of really good players, Tom Tumblety. I mean, they had a really stocked team. What year was that, Larry? Your junior year.
89.
Yeah, 89, 90, yeah, 80. I mean, so it was late 80s. You know, we had a strike in 87. It was 88. I'm floating around the league trying to figure some things out. But I said, you know what, let me go ahead and just go into coaching. I really thought I was just going to go into coaching. The NFL was over. And I say all that to say, I don't even know how those guys know. They inspired me to go try out again. And I had a little second run in the NFL watching these young guys out there doing what they're doing. So it was a real special time in my life, looking back, that while I was able to pour into them, they poured into me, you know what I'm saying, and got me back on track.
What were the attributes that you seen in Larry as a young running back trying to find himself?
Right. Once again, thinking, look, I got drafted in 86. This is 89. So, I mean, I'm at my peak. And when I came and seen him, you know, they looked at me as big unk, you know, like muscular and fast and strong. And I'm looking at these young dudes and we're working out together and they getting at me. I'm like, whoa, I couldn't run with Larry. I could not run with Larry. Larry was faster than me. I'm like, yo, wait a minute, I'm NFL caliber. He was big, strong, smart, and I'm like, so physically it was obvious. I mean, his size was there. You know, had a little Eric Dickerson to me, you know, that tall, you know, they always go, get low, get low. I'm like, nah, he's a high runner, but he's not running high from a standpoint of when it's time to hit that hole. Really put me on the mind of Eric Dickerson. And like I said, being a young guy and still playing, I was able to get there and coach the running backs and kind of get them a little ahead of the game. I was teaching them things about catching the ball. That was important. Pass block. And they didn't even really think about that in high school and talk about that. But him and Adam enjoyed it. I mean, once they got going, they wanted to knock linebackers out. They wanted to block for each other. They were in the backfield together. They never cried about blocking. And I was like, that's what's going to get you in the league. That's what's going to get you in college. They're going to look at that blocking. So he had a great aptitude for football. Him and Adam were great partners together. They were beasts. I mean, they pushed each other. They really, really pushed each other. Had a couple of young kids that were nice too, Mitchell. And so they were really pushing each other. But he had the physical right out the gate. You've seen the size. You've seen the speed. You've seen the moves. You've seen the vision. So he had all the talents.
You know, me as a former football coach, there are a couple positions that are very difficult to coach unless you inherently know them or have played them. And you know, you being an elite back, running back was one of those positions, right? You know, you never tell a great back that was the wrong cut, right? It's a field thing.
Right.
And so, you know, what kind of help could you provide coming from your experience with two young guys that were obviously super talented under your care? How did you approach that?
Yeah. You know, with those guys, it was really about the mental. I understood that, man, it's one thing. Yeah, that's a big part of it to have the physical. But when you've been through it a little, and I was ahead of these guys, and I would see super, super talented people who just couldn't make it because their mental wasn't right. So it was really important for me once I realized that Larry had the speed, the size, and all that. I mean, he get frustrated. He was a young kid. He had things going on at home. I mean, you know, we grew up in a good environment, but there's always stuff going on. And I really worked on Larry more about reminding him to stay confident, not to get frustrated. Larry had a tendency to get frustrated a little quick if things weren't going the right way and get mad. But it was his passion for the game. So really it was the mental part. I mean, physically like I said, he was big and fast, and he was a one-cut guy. As soon as he seen it, pow, it was through the rough. I mean, he's returning kicks and everything. And at that time, I think he was what were you, Larry? About 6'1", 200, 190? Yeah. He's returning kicks. I mean, he had that part. So the physical part I wasn't really worried about. And like I said earlier, I wanted him to really learn the game and be a study of the game. So, for instance, you know, I would teach them, hey, what do you do when you don't have the ball? Are you going to make that block? Are you going to come on the pass? Are you going to, you know, be there for your quarterback? Are you going to pick up a blitz? Are you going to go down, you know, run a screen play, or, you know, shake the linebacker? Let's work on this linebacker. So I really was working on their pass game. He had good hands too. So all those things that I knew that he would need next level, but really the mental part. He's smart kid. So I knew the mental would be there on the football field.
And Larry, I'll kind of ask you the flip side of that, right? Like, you know, coaching kids, there's a believability factor in it, right? And so how did you perceive, you know, receiving that coaching from somebody who's been there, done that, been ultra successful from that standpoint?
Yeah, I'll give you two segments. So one is on the field, one's off the field. One on the field is, the one thing I love about Chuck is that he taught you how to stay on your shield. Like, you know, don't get off your shield. I remember we were down by 3 against Woodland Hills, and I'll die with remembering what Chuck said to me. He says, Larry, you catch that ball, you run it back. Homecoming's this week. You can take my car if you score this touchdown. So
it was a 99-yarder too. There was no 2-yard line.
You're right about that. After I scored that touchdown, the first thing Uncle Chuck said to me is, Larry, you got the keys. You don't have to say. And when I came and picked the car up, I mean, it's almost like he threw the keys at me. Like, listen, you go and enjoy yourself. Even when I came back the next day, he said, why are you coming back so soon? I'm like, whoa. I was like, I could have hit the car a little longer. And then the second is that life after football, I can always go to Chuck and ask him, is this the right business decision, right? This man's been grounded. He's touched everything. So even if he don't know, he can lead me and he can take me to the right reference that can help me out. But life after football, this man has helped me out way more than he's done in football.
Yeah, that was important. And I'd probably jumping a little bit ahead on the question, but my skin gets a little bumpy when it comes to what really mattered. I mean, I start seeing in Larry, because then as the senior year comes around, you start talking about scholarships and where you're going to go. Real life is happening. I mean, this was the early 90s, man. The streets was crazy. The streets was getting crazy, late 80s, early 90s. All of a sudden, dudes who we used to look at and be like, man, why aren't you coming out for sports no more? Why aren't you hooping no more? Why aren't you this? They showing up at school with a pocket full of money, cars. The girls is shifting from the ball players to the dudes with the money. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? I ain't that much older than them. I'm old enough. But, when you're young, if you're 5 years older than somebody, you're ancient. But you realize, when you're 50 and somebody's 40, you're like, we're the same age. So I was able to relate to these guys. And it was really important that call from the street was coming hard. I mean, at them dudes and at me. And I'm like, yo, man, I mean, it was like the New Jack City days. And I'm like, guys, you got to stay focused. You got to watch the girls. I know your boy got this car and got that. And somebody wants to challenge you at school now because they got a couple of dollars and call you a name and try to get you in a fight and all that. And the thing with Larry was I knew that he was going to be successful. And really, I knew he was going to be more successful outside of football. Because I just knew the limitations of football at that time. I mean, now you got NIL and all this money and all that stuff. Even at the best, I mean, back then, you had to be, I mean, the Tony Dorches of the world were making $1 million. So, I mean, and I had come from a business background, so I'd make sure those guys would be around me and see my father's trucking company, come over to the house, see how I was living, letting them know I was doing events and doing different things, showing them how I was making money outside of football. Because I was like, man, y'all some smart dudes. And the biggest joy I got out of everything was watching Larry just go crazy in the business world. That's where I really wanted to make an impact. And when he would call me all the time, Uncle, I'm about to make this move. I'm doing this. Hey, here's what happened in corporate America. Here's what I'm doing on my personal stuff. That was way more satisfying to me because I knew that was going to be the foundation for the type of man he was going to be and what he's become.
And so if you could, kind of summarize your, maybe specifically that senior year and, where you felt like your high school career took you, and seeing where you finished as a senior and the improvements that the team made, and then your personal goals, how could you summarize that piece and where you wanted to go after that high school experience?
Great question. So Dallas, after high school, I was a little lost, man. I didn't have a roadmap to understand what the next steps were, right? I felt derailed when I was a Prop 48 for Florida University, and then that fell through. So I was lost for a moment, and then just one shiny moment. It was in June, and Gene Smith came to our house, and Gene Smith had a conversation with my mom, and everything he said was what my mom wanted to hear. It was all about education. He didn't even talk about athletics. He just talked about education. And my mom was like, you're going to that school. And I said to myself, okay, well, I was so heavy into what my mom and her decisions, and in retrospect, she always had my best interests. So I didn't know if this was the right thing, but I just knew it was a mom thing. Mom's like, hey, this is what I want for you. So I had a choice, but my decision was based off of my mother. And then, but it was great because I got a chance to sit back and watch a lot of things in perspective around my life. And I started really missing football. So the time I got to Edinboro in 91, I just had that passion. Like I'm ready to go. And it was then I started realizing, Dallas, that going into Edinboro was the right thing. Because at first I even going into the summer to Edinboro in 91, I was still hesitant, like, "Hey, I'm going to Edinboro." I really didn't know too much about it. Until it got cold, then I really knew something about it. But I didn't really know a lot about Edinboro. I didn't even really know a lot about Erie. I didn't know nothing really too much about that area. I knew a lot about Ohio. I knew a lot about Buffalo. I just didn't know a lot about Erie. So so going there was unfamiliar territory for me. But it was a great opportunity, and it changed my life going to Edinboro.
I don't even know if Prop 48 is a thing now. You know, back in our time, it was. You know, it was a you're sacrificing a year of eligibility. Can you touch on that Prop 48 piece?
Yeah, so in Prop 48, so each school was allowed to use a Prop 48, and in that Prop 48, it was considered today as like your red shirt year. So you would go to that school, but in your Prop 48 that first year, because you didn't make it academically. So whether you had your GPA but you didn't pass your SAT, or you passed your SAT didn't have your GPA, or you probably didn't have both of them. But when you didn't have both of them, I don't think that would carry Prop 48. I think you had one or the other. I didn't have the SAT, so Florida said, "Okay, we're going to Prop 48 Mr. Jackson." And I took my SAT like at the end, like I took it in March, and I got my results back in April. And in April, they made me Prop 48. So I went from Prop 48 in April to June. They dropped my Prop 48. So I was like, okay, what do I do from here? And my coach, Neil Gordon, was like, okay, I'm going to call around. So he called IUP, he called Edinboro, and he called University of California, Pennsylvania. And then I talked to IUP first. And they offered me like a partial scholarship. And then Gene came down and was like, "Hey man, I'm going to give you a full scholarship, and you just know that you need to go to community college here in CCAC in Monroeville, Pennsylvania for a year. And then so that'll be your red shirt year." So I couldn't really red shirt because I used my first year academically going to a community college. So that was really my red shirt year. So when I went to Edinboro, although I was a freshman, I was really considered as a red shirt freshman. That's why in my freshman year in Edinboro, I didn't have a lot of carries, but I couldn't get redshirted because my first year of eligibility, I went to CCAC Community College.
You know, when I listen to, you know, the disappointment that comes with Prop 48 and the frustration that caused for a lot of athletes during that time, I think right around the time that you were coming out of high school, you guys were within those first waves of players that were affected by that policy. And, you know, there's been a lot of guys that lost that year of eligibility and weren't able to compete. You know, for you, knowing that you had a school like a Florida after, you know, fighting so hard to make yourself known at the high school level and, you know, going out on a high note as a senior, you know, what is that like to have that glimpse of that opportunity to a large SEC school and then, you know, have that kind of taken away from you and, you know, being left to go back to the drawing board and try to recreate another opportunity for yourself?
At the time, there was a lot of disconnect. I was carrying a lot of ego. Even coming to, so this is before your time. So this is something you're going to learn. So me coming in, I already had a chip on my shoulder. So I was in the locker room, and some of these guys may not, you may not know, but I remember the upperclassmen, like you had Rennie Martin, you had Wade Smith, you had Michael Barnes, you had some elite top tier players, and I kind of like ruffled their feathers. And I'm like, I said something stupid, like I shouldn't even be here. And they're like, how so? I'm like, I ain't supposed to be playing with you, dude. Like, come on, are you serious? Like, y'all guys are peons. Like, I said something stupid. And we came into practice, and we were in camp, and they welcomed me into Division II. And when they welcomed me into Division II, I said to myself, shit, this ain't that bad. Like I've never been attacked. I mean, it's like they snapped the ball and it was a pitch. I think I had all 11 defensive players that made the tackle. Like, it was crazy. It was like, and then they never let go. They, like, the whole camp, they just made me better. It's like, and then practice, I had to really earn my respect. So that's why the upperclassmen, I really, really salute them, because they actually made me better by me just talking and opening my mouth and just being disrespectful. But then also we had a running back, Lester Fry, that he was the elite running back. Like, this guy was like lower. I've never seen nobody's legs like this. Like he was a full running back. Like, he was everything a running back is supposed to be. That's what this Lester Fry was. And then my freshman year, he just kept pushing me and kept pushing me. And then we had Derek Russell. So Derek Russell was complete opposite of Lester Fry. He was just more like a Tony Dorsett. He had like a lot of style with him. Like, he was smooth. Like, he would run, and it was just always smooth. So it was one of those things that I'm looking at, and I'm saying to myself, like, man, like, I can't even get on the field, and I'm in Division II, and I'm supposed to be like this elite player. So it just made me understand that I'm in the right place. Like, I knew when it came down to my sophomore year, I said that this is the right place for me. God doesn't make any mistakes. Me going to Edinboro, having span upon great people like yourself, Ron, even outside of football, just great people. And we was like in this little hub, so we had to kind of like learn how to get along. And there's so many things about Edinboro that just taught me how to be developed into a better man, better person. But I don't think I would have got that out of going to a bigger school. Like, it's that small, union that we had. It just made me a better person.
I arrived on the scene in 1993, and something that you said earlier resonates with me because you talk about the ego, you talk about the chip, and feeling like this wasn't what your destiny was supposed to be. But I do recall, that acclimation period of coming into two-a-day camps. As you come out of the high school level, everybody's experience is a little bit varied and different, but just that rapid transition from showing up on campus, you start out the first day in t-shirts and shorts. The next day you're already wearing a helmet. And then by day 3, you got full pads on and everybody's banging. They know the plays already. But the one thing that stands out to me is just how the environment and the high level of competition that was demanded during those tour days. I do remember like one of the first full pad practices, and as freshmen, we're observing to see what we're in for. And I remember Mario Houston and Steve Russell, guys like Jason Perkins. Everybody has their counterpart that they're targeting on the offense, and everybody on the offense has their counterpart that they're targeting on the defense. And some of those inside periods and those team periods were just such a high level of hitting and high level of competition that it makes you, as a young guy, realize that whatever you did before coming here, you have to step up your effort, number one. You have to step up your mental intake, number two. And then when it's your chance to, get that small chance for you to prove what you are, who you are, and where you're from, you better deliver, because there's somebody out there that's on that field that probably shouldn't be there at that level, that's gonna, make college football very real for you very fast. When you think about those times where you're rising and starting to really dominate within the conference, and you know the plays, what's expected. You're not intimidated by who's coming in the Sox Harrison Stadium. You're not intimidated by going down 79 across 90 and really, getting off of that bus with this group of guys that are battle tested. For you, what is your perspective being in that featured running back position? Having some other high level guys within that offense. Jody Dickerson comes from Michigan State. You have an offensive line that is really oversized for Division II in those early 90s. What is that for you, knowing that you have these resources and these other people around you to help make you great and to help make you dominant?
So so in the era that we came in, we were in sports, it's nothing like today. Like, there was a lot of dependencies. Like, things just had to fall in line. One of the things is you had to have great recruitment coming out of your high school, right? Whether that was your coach, that was your athletic director, you had to have somebody who was an influencer for people to come in and even just come and visit you. Because just having the morale of you just being a great player in our era, that was something that people wasn't just coming in and scouting just that one player. So if you came from a great organization, you had a better chance of making it to Division One. Division Two then falls. Those great players that didn't make it to Division Two, Division One, was actually on Division Two in our era. So when you look at it in hindsight, so when I graduated in '94, you had two running backs, not free agency, but was in the draft, right? So you had the guy from University of Connecticut, and then you had the one guy who played in the blue and gray game with Curtis, who only had one eye. So that's to tell you the elite players that was in Edinboro. And then we had an offensive lineman, Mike Hagerice, who made it to the NFL. So it wasn't far-fetched to see a Division II player like it is today of making it to the NFL. So you had a lot of talent in Division II. And then when I knew that we had a lot of talent is when I started working out with the players at the University of Pitt. That's when I said, yeah, we're just as good as a lot of like their players at the University of Pittsburgh, because I'm training with them, and then I'm pound for pound stronger than a lot of the players, and I'm just saying to myself like, woo, this is like and some of them, they couldn't believe I was Division II. They just kept saying, "You're Edinboro?" You're like, "Yeah, I'm Edinboro." I'm like, "Yeah, it's real down there." So it's just, it wasn't too far of a stretch from D1 to D2, right? Today, yeah, because you got so much technology, so much, you can make a video of your son and send it out and possibly get some calls and people kind of like show interest in you. You didn't have that in the 90s, right? So coming into Edinboro, the talent, I was really shocked how talented, and I spoke with you too, Ron. I kept on saying to myself, your structure for a DB, you told me your size, and I couldn't. I'm like, maybe it was your pads, but you could have easily been like an outside linebacker. But you know, it's just the way your body was. Like, you always had the short. You had the neck roll short. I'm like, what kind of DB is this dude? But then you go out, and I'm looking at you positioning yourself against wide receivers, and you're right side by side with them. So I'm like, okay, that's why he's a DB, because of your talent. But easily you could have became like an outside linebacker. Easily. You had the body structure for it. So you just had a lot of talent in D2. D2 was just, it was different in the 90s. And then you look at some of the players that played in our era. Like, those was D1 players, man. So a lot of respect for Edinboro. A lot of respect for even IUP. IUP, uh they're the head coach that was in during our time. Their brother just won a national championship at the University of Indiana. So it's a lot of talent to D2, man. It ain't nothing to play with.
So you talked about the change in Division 1, Division 2, and we talked about Prop 48, and I'm in education currently, and I don't know if I agree with everything that goes on at the college level and the changes, but I definitely think that there's a complete benefit to the student athlete with some of the academics, how there's more latitude in allowing for academic success, some of the financials. And it's funny because, I think you're dead on. Look at all the teams that have gone from Division 2 to 1AA, not even 1AA now. What is it? FCS, right? And then FCS to FBS. It's kind of an arms race to bigger and better. But when we were growing up, there was no social media. You had VHS tapes that you'd mail out if you were lucky. And so you're right. Like, it was so much easier to miss a guy, or to have a situation that maybe academically schools weren't promoting. We didn't get it as educators. And there's so much more opportunity now for athletes to expand and grow. And you're right, man. Take a line from what was the movie with Al Pacino? The margin for error is so thin. And who's to say in a year or two you're not that guy, right? So it's funny just how, being on this side of it, things change so much, and sometimes for the better. But you're right, it was so competitive 20, 30 years ago. It's all relative. And so, how would you summarize your college career, from entering and getting welcomed to Division II football to, finishing it and wrapping it up?
So it definitely super exceeded my expectations. But when you're presently living in it, it's just like things are going so fast that you don't get enough time to kind of like look back until it's over with. And then when it's over with, it's like you go into these moments that you're like, damn, like it's over with. Like it's no more. It's just like I gotta start off with my life and build a family because all I knew for 9 years was football. So I had a lot of responsibility that I was doing, and it was all attached to football. So then when that was gone, I was just thinking like what is this new life? Right? Because I super exceeded in football, but then what does this mean for my career? And my expectations are like I'm just going to pick off where I left off at. But when I started my career like that, it didn't pan out that way. It was almost like you're starting over. Um, you have no identity. You got to start building your statue. Whatever you did at Edinboro, that's Edinboro. We don't give a damn about what's going on, what you done in Edinboro. Those is your personal accomplishment. What are you going to do for the company? So that's when I came into that aha moment. Like, oh my goodness, what did this? I got to start all over again. And then I had a lot of selfish ways. I had a lot of immaturity. So what allowed me to become successful is failure. I I went through this transitional. Um, it's a difference between failing and failure. Let me just get this right. I went through a lot of obstacles in failing. I was never listed as a failure, but in order to transition to understand how to be successful, you got to learn how you to fail. You got to learn how to, look at things and not accept it, but knowing that it's just a part of your growing and your growth. So when I started realizing that, because like I said, I was just super competitive, but my competitive was always winning. So when I started saying, okay, I can't like in football, I can blame Ron. I said, man, dog, you'd have caught that interception, we'd have won the game. Like it's not like it's a team, and you can always have the blame game on somebody. But when you go through your personal career, there's no more blame game. It's just you against the world. Then it's just like when I went through that, I'm like, you know what? I got to get out of this space because in order for me to reach what the pinnacle is, and that's in my career, whether that success, whatever that success looked like, I had to get out of that frenzy mode. Like, because I was going the wrong direction. And then what helped me out was just my foundation. I got married. My wife's tremendously just she's a person who's um has impacted positive results for my life. I had a great, you know, learning lessons when it comes down to my pastor. So I just started kind of like building myself around a good circle. And then I just remember my wife's grandmother telling me, hey, Larry, when I see your friends and when you getting around that circle, I can show you your future. And that always resonated with me because I'm like, you know what? I gotta put myself around good people. So like good people coming from Edinboro was always a Michael Sims. I've always put myself around Michael Edwards, Chris on Davis. I put myself around good people. So in that unisys around that circle, it just helped me become a better person because they were good people. It's just that I needed to keep my my covenant. I needed to keep that a positive covenant. And we all got our flaws in certain ways. We all can be assholes, but we know at the end of the day, we're not going to be somewhat biased in being a yes sir type of friendship. Like we have a committee that one thing that we don't do, we don't sit there practically, um, you know, we critique one another, but we don't criticize one another. It's a difference. So when someone of my friends see that I'm doing something, wrong, just like Curtis said earlier, they'll push you on the side and they'll have a conversation, but it's critiquing you. It's not criticizing. We won't put you on Front Street and say, hey man, that was dumb. We just keep it real positive, and we all grown men. I can't say we're all trying to go to the same place, but we're trying to go somewhere that we can live a good legacy with.
Yeah, no, I think I think talking to, you know, Adam and Chuck and Curtis, and seeing the people that have impacted you, and also you impacting them, right, and having that accountability, um it's so important for us as men, as women, to have good people around us, to when we have our ego moments or our bad moments, to keep us in check. And I think that's so impressive, just to kind of hear about your story, and just the connections that you've made. And I think it's also important that, you're obviously successful as a professional, as a husband, as a father. um in today's society, we think everything is always up and to the right, and that if we have that failure or falling forward, right, failing forward, that is the end of the road. And it's not. And I think that's why some of this is so important, is to, because for you, for me, for Ron, for Curtis, there's no more snaps at one point. And what do we do from there? And how do you handle that moment of, you said it right, the identity. Who am I without this game, or whatever craft you're pursuing? And to me, that's what's just, really resonates and is so impressive with all the things that you've talked about and brought to today. And I just wanted to make sure I said that, because it really is key to many other people.
Yeah, I completely agree. And me and Ron was talking about this the other night. I don't know if you recall, but the way I look at this platform is looking at, like, we can state the obvious, and this is actually a platform that talk about sports and talk about one last down. But the real purpose I love about this platform is that it talks about real life, right? Life after football. And then um everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own story. It's just that, when you look at my life, you would look at it as far as, hey, Larry was really successful in Edinboro. Well, what has Larry done after Edinboro? And I've actually did more successful things after football, that um I've done a lot of Hall of Fame things within my career outside of Edinboro. So that's where my biggest accomplishments are. And then also, it's each one teach one, right? I love to see me going and helping out mentoring, because that's the challenge for me, is that there's a lot of people in my career. And what in my career is what is called a principal UX designer. So I'm the one who builds the structure from an end to end over building out technology. So whether it's your app, whether it's you're in production, um, I'm building and generating from a research to gathering a retrospect of information to then testing that, and then rapidly running designs and going into in production. That's a major uh, um, responsibility within a company. And it's so major that when you're dealing with $1 billion company, I'm probably sitting in the tier anywhere from 10 to investing in 40% of their success matrix usually comes from me. So that's a major responsibility. So when I look at that and I start looking at the things also I've done within my career, which now I'm a journeyman for an app that I'm building called a journey. So I'm trying to extend my career and just not also just being in stocks and bonds, but I'm trying to be in entrepreneurship as well. So this, like, and those are things that you want to challenge yourself to advance in life. And that's what takes me to understanding, like, it never would have happened if it wasn't for me playing football. Because one thing Ron can say to, everyone on this panel is that when you look back at being disciplined, it all starts out from football. When you have a coach, especially in the 80s and 90s, it's totally different than today. Like, you would actually have a coach grabbing your face mask and shaking your helmet in front of your parents and no one saying anything. It was not one of those things that, oh man, coach is going to jail, or so and so's parents gonna come off the stadium and they're gonna go, oh my God, wait till they see that what the parents and how they're gonna react to the coach. None of that happened. It was like, at the time, the parents was applauding. Like, yeah, that's good for you, son. You need some discipline in your life. So just being able to take those type of situations, I'm able to endeavor that into my career. So football has done a lot for me. Football is my vessel. Football is my bloodline. So taking that and learning how to invest, from stocks and bonds, everything, it just comes from football. So, I'm always thankful that I just, in the people that I meet that are some of the best people, or people who I played football with. Because we understand one another, because it's the most vulnerable stage of your life. Because there's times that you go in the locker room and we don't repeat these things. There's so many things that we can share. I've never heard a player share with what goes on in their locker room ever. But things that goes on in our locker room, if we shared that, that would be a positive message for people, that to know that, man, we go through real things in that locker room, but we just don't share it. It's just, those are the moments that it's just, we keep that oath, and we'll have a conversation amongst us, but that don't go past us. So those are the most vulnerable stages. And then if I could have a conversations that I'm making a big decisions, it's usually going to be somebody who actually I played football with.
My first introduction to who Larry Jackson was in 1993, as a young freshman coming out of Youngstown, Ohio, learning more about this dynamic talent and the engine to this high-powered Division II team that was chasing something as simple as a title in one half of a 14-team league. To see the absolute dominance and the effort that you put in during my time watching you as a teammate, it was nothing short of phenomenal. When you look at your accomplishments on the field, the accumulated stats, the records that were set, and in saying that, you pass some really great people, and then you set the benchmark for others to come behind you and try to exceed. But getting to have an extended conversation with you, getting to have an extended conversation with your wider network of close confidants, it just opens up the picture of who Larry Jackson is as a complete, total man. I've always loved your personality. You provided some of the best moments in terms of just watching someone be in their element and do that to a high, excellent level. But the lighter side of you, and the funny one-liners that you would crack, and the activity that you kept going, good or bad, to have someone upset at you or laughing right alongside of you, it was a pleasure, and I realized how valuable that was all these years later. the place that you've put yourself into in your later life and the importance of what you do, the beautiful family that you've developed and crafted, and bucked against those stereotypes that, are shoveled on us unfairly as inner city people. It's actually something to shoot for beyond just you being a tailback. You're a dynamic individual, a great human being. For you, if you had that one more down to reflect back on in your life and pick a moment in time that's important and special to you, what would that be for Larry Jackson? Can you tell us about that and set that picture for us?
This one probably be a little bit different, Ron. Probably going to just do a public announcement for sincerely apologizing to the 1992 team of seniors. So going into the Ferris State game, me and my positioning coach, we was not seeing eye to eye. We wasn't in line. And I approached it as if he owed me an apology. And because I didn't settle on and get an apology from my position coach, I went into the playoffs telling the coaches that I wasn't playing. We lost against Ferris State, and I think we lost by a point or 2 points, something stupid. So if I had one more down, it would be one more game and playing that game in Ferris State, which a lot of people put, a lot on the line that year. And some of the players, that was their last game, and they remember it as, what would have happened if Larry Jackson would have played. So when you carry your one more down into what ifs, it leaves a strain on your life that I feel like I'll have clarity after this, apologizing to the class of 92 teammates, because I really let them down in not partaking in that game off of the ignorance of, just making a unfortunate judgment on a better half for me because of my own selfishness. So my one last down would be a game that I would play for my brothers, and knowing that the things that they contributed in their whole year was pretty much dedicated to team. And that day I was selfish, and then I didn't think about we, I thought about I. So my one down would be, apologizing to the 92 senior teammates that I let down.
Yeah, I really agree with what you said. I think it's really good to have somebody pushing you and challenging you, and never to feel like you're the guy, right? That really develops you when you look to your left or right or behind you, and there's a competitor that can make you better and make them better. Our podcast is kind of based on the concept of one more down, and just kind of reflecting and looking at the aspects of football, but also the impacts it has on life. And so I'm going to leave you with one question, which is, if you had one more down to play alongside with Larry, what would that be? Who would be there, and what would that look like?
Man, both of our families would be there. First of all, our mothers, which were friends, very good friends. Our sisters, our family, they'd be together. People like Lenny Gallo, Chuck Sanders, we'd be at Penn Hills Stadium, man. And you know what? We would run throw eye right, power at 6, right? And I let Larry be the tailback and I'd be the fullback and blow the end up off his backside, just put him down. And he scored for 6. That one more play, because then I get in the end zone and talk shit to him about, excuse me if I can cuss or not, but I talk stuff to him about, hey, yo, you see that? That's how you put somebody on the back and let them get in the end zone, bro. You need to learn from that. That's how it was. This is what it'll be.
Getting to look over your tape for a few moments and just seeing how explosive you are. It's just tremendous to hear you give love to your brother. I think at our age, friendship is important. Our exploits and accolades fade over time. Your children don't care about them, but
Right.
to be able to connect and remember upon a time when you were young, spry, and once great, and still have that same love for your brother is just tremendous. So I thank you for showing up for 22 today, and I look forward
Always.
to having a deeper conversation with you as well.
All right, Dallas and Ron, I appreciate you both. Look forward to hearing to you.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely.
All right, y'all have a good one. Be safe. I'll catch up with you.
You hit on so many points with those last comments, and I think it gives really good perspective on, on this side of the athletic career, the coaching career. Those careers are kind of vehicles to the rest of life, and one of the things that's why we do what we do, right? We want to get to know the players behind the face mask, but then also what motivates and the impact that athletics had on them to propel them in the future. So the question is, if you had one more down, coaching, playing, with Larry in your atmosphere, what would that scenario look like? Who would be there? And let us know what you think from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably touche, but it's so true. And I think we all say this. I mean, you as a coach, you as an ex-ball player, and all the things we're doing, don't we wish we could have just enjoyed it a little bit more? Don't we wish we could just go back and really, man, one more practice? And I'm not even talking about a game. That's way too, I get goosebumps thinking about a game. But if we could, all the things that made us so frustrated, oh, I'm tired, I got to go to practice, everybody else gets to do this, that girl, that's this, that. If I could have one more day, and that's what I would tell Larry, man, if we could go back to that time machine and come out of that field house with your brothers. Like I said, I didn't play ball, I didn't play pro ball, and the biggest thing I remember is Big Red football. I mean, I was All-American, and I wasn't even no star in high school. I was not a star player in high school. I was out of position. I wasn't known, but to play for the Big Red Indians. So my one thing would be to, if you were in that time machine, would just enjoy that moment. And then I would say fast forward to present day and just really look at where your feet are at and enjoy that second, enjoy that minute. Just enjoy to be blessed to be on this call right now, to be able to breathe and move and just do the things we're able to do. It's kind of, I'm not being a downer, but sometimes I'll have to go pick up my son from college or something. He's 4 hours away. And, I'm like, okay, I have to go pick my son up. But on that drive, every minute I'm thinking like, wow, man, imagine the kids right now that don't have a father to come get them, or they're in jail right now, or they're in a hospital bed sick, or boom. You just go through a million things that are that make you realize what a blessing it is to what we're doing in this perfect second right now. And one thing Larry knows about me, man, he always knows he can call me for a smile, for a laugh. I ain't going to be down, and it ain't nothing I'm faking. It's just I've learned to really appreciate life. And there really ain't nothing to tell Larry, because, he did it. He learned it. He lives it. The man, he's a great father. He's a great husband. He's a great man. So, and now when you get older, you're like, yeah, I did that. I had something to do with that. You see your work is like, yeah.
I think one of the important hallmarks of knowing what a real man is to see someone who has a little bit of influence, takes the time to reach down to pull somebody else up. your sentiments and your thoughts about who Larry Jackson is as a person, a man, and a player. It's a reflection of your great character. We appreciate you stopping in to, shed some light on Larry and his pursuits as an athlete, but very appreciative of the glowing words that you say that shows the type of man that he's blossomed and developed into because of your connection with each other. So thank you.
I appreciate you guys. Larry knows I always pick up the phone for Larry. He always picks up the phone for me. We never get too busy. That really is. There's some kids that are my nephews, but that's my son. That's one of my sons, man. So I appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Keep doing your thing.
Love you too.
So as we wrap this section up, we appreciate you being on and your relationship with Larry. We always wrap up with the question of, if you had one more down with Larry Jackson involved on the field, off the field, as you stated earlier, you guys never played with or against each other. But if you had one more down with Larry, what would that look like? Who would be there? And how would that situation play out?
Well, something, what you made me think of is a moment in time when we were, I think it was my senior year in college, or maybe it was when I was back training in Pittsburgh. I had told Larry, you can come work out with me, because the trainer that was training me was open to training Larry. And I convinced this trainer to train Larry also, because I said, this guy is more talented than I am. He has size, he's just as fast, everything. So the guy started training Larry, and we would meet every day. And he would have us pushing trucks down the field and doing all kind of running stadium stairs and everything. Now, at this point, I was making sure that I was committed to football. This is after I had that argument with the coach and everything. So I'm on a mission, and I'm like, Larry, come with me, because I know you can do this if I can do it. I wasn't sure that I could, but I felt very confident that Larry could. So that one more down, I would love to have watched Larry just flourish. I remember at that time we had a discussion, and Larry and I were talking about this the other day. Larry missed a couple of days of working out, and the coach, the trainer, said to us, Kurt, tell Larry if he doesn't come today, he can't come back. And Larry didn't come back. And if I had one more down, I would have tried that much harder to get Larry to come back, because I'm telling you, I played 11 years in the NFL, and there were so many guys who were either in front of me or behind me that didn't have the talent that Larry had. And I would love to have seen, not the crowd with spilled milk, because it's in the past, but I would have loved to have seen what Larry could have done in the NFL. But outside of that, I've been so, proud as a friend to see Larry's second act, to go through the disappointment of not making it into the NFL, to go through the disappointment of, like he was saying, not necessarily disappointment, because I know Larry was happy for me, but cheering me on and being whatever he could be to, help, progress my career. But to see Larry pick up the pieces and build the life for himself and his family that he has today, as I always tell him, I truly admire it, because I know what Larry had to overcome to be the man, the father, the husband that he is today.
I know what it is to have lifelong friends and allies and people that you rely on in those hard, difficult times, especially, as young Black men trying to figure it out sometimes as young men, we're left without the guidance of a father to tell you the right thing at the right time and in the right moment. And you have to make those tough decisions just based off of instinct. To see that you two guys have stayed locked in with each other through all of those peaks and valleys, it does my heart good to see that relationship flourishing between the two of you. I know what type of dynamic guy that Larry is, and listening to your conversation, those characteristics and what makes him a star in his own right, it just burns bright, and you really understand why a person that's been afforded those opportunities such as you have has stayed in there in the pocket with a man like Larry Jackson. So thank you for coming on today and adding light to our platform, and continue to do the great work that you do. I enjoy that humbleness about your spirit, because sometimes that spotlight and those accomplishments outshine what's inside the man. So thank you for being you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Really enjoyed it. And it's always a pleasure for me to talk about my best friend.
Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Play your own game. Play your own